working day in Ukrainian Crisis Media Center, and the topic of the next press briefing is research Crimea war preconditions for Russia's aggression. And our speakers are Volodymyr Gorbulin, Director of the National Institute for Strategic Research, and Oleksandr Lytvynenko, Deputy Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine. And Mr. Gorbulin, take the floor, please. Dear audience, we live in such a time when many new historical dates appear, and most of them concern dramatic events of the newest history, with which we're connected by the memory of bullets and losses. And among those dates, to February 20th of 2014, is not by chance. It is connected for majority of Ukrainians with the bloody events on the Maidan Незалежності, and hundreds of those people who were at Maidan and millions of people watching on TV the conflict. And they did not know that the second front line was already open those days. On 20th February, the agents of Russian Federation started active part of operation, subversive operation aimed at destruction of Ukraine. And the Russian and Crimean War started in 2 years is not so long time, especially for a country which did not think of war and even did not imagine some armed opposition against the neighboring country. So now we reassess and revise very many things. With publication of this our research, we would like to register the starting point with which a principle and new approach to the matters of national security starts on February 20th of 2014. It should never repeat again. To this end, we should understand clearly how the Russian aggression was prepared and what were the methods and what are the methods today, and which our weaknesses it revealed and used, and why we were absolutely unready to combat with Russia to defend our motherland. And our findings are presented in this brochure. Many of our conclusions are commonplace, they are well known, but some of our findings are have not yet been disclosed. The first is that the Russian Federation has never recognized our independence, starting with 1991. Year of 1991, Russia and the Federation has never abandoned its attempts to return Ukraine. The question was just when to do that most comfortably. The strategy in the Kremlin changed depending on the question whether to return Ukraine as a whole or by parts. The other question is to use gas pipeline, propaganda of Russian world, bribing of Ukrainian politicians. You can see that even during crisis times of Russian statehood and during the coup of 1993 in Moscow and during Chechen war in Grozny, Russian leadership still remember about their desire to occupy Ukraine, to return Ukraine. There was one moment when the tone, connotation of relationship with Ukraine changed dramatically on our territory. The agents subversive agents started working. Just try to remember how many films in 2006 were produced by Russia, where Russian-Ukrainian war was depicted, and we smiled those days on that. Yanukovych team, when it came to the power, it give the green light to Russian Federation. Ukrainian sovereignty and independence were dismantled because the leaders of the security service of the Ministry of Interior they used their power to destroy the mechanism of defense of Ukraine, and the agreements were signed which were of negative impact on Ukraine, aimed to destroy Ukraine, and Ukrainian companies switched to Russian hands. And what was happening in the Russian Federation? In its country, the Kremlin did just opposite things. Instead of decentralization, federalization, and decreasing the role of president, strict vertical hierarchy of power and authoritarian model of power were established. Instead of liberalization of humanitarian policy and openness of informational environment, total control of the media, aggressive propaganda of the Russian world ideas, censorship, and calls to combat some mysterious fascists. Instead of disarmament, large-scale armament and reform of the armed forces, and emphasis on special forces, combat forces intended to battle in conditions of hybrid war. And during Euromaidan events, the Russian Federation started trainings just next to the border of Ukraine, and in 2014 there were 18 such trainings. In some of them, more than 100,000 military men took part. Comparing to those trainings of NATO, the scale had never been like that. So direct confrontation started in various directions. Russian Spring operation seemed like an offensive of a military man who is drug addicted. Or it seems that some like a patient who is in a reanimation block and is still under drugs, and unexpected attack resulted in that the shock was followed with anger, which not only stopped the enemy but proved that the national identities transcend, and Ukrainian nation became dramatically strong and principally new and civilizational reality party emerged between traditional centers of opposition. A new subject of European policy and security emerged. This is Ukraine and solidarity of new Eastern European democracies. The Russian aggression plans were very strict and detailed, but the scale of opposition was not forecasted. Previous international events they gave some ideas to Russia, preconditions to Russia to think that if Russia attack Ukraine, the world will soon give up, but the world was unanimously in support of Ukraine. This was the second factor which helped us to withstand in the hard times. The war has not finished and the aggressor is on our territory, and Ukraine has been in the focus of international policy, and its matter is on the agenda of all international forums. This situation is unique and it has never happened before. So the scale in Munich 2016 was less than important than in 2014. There were objective factors, the immigration wave and events in Syria and Southern Africa. They became more resonant. What lessons should we learn? We experience different moments of consolidation and quarrels, but the insights which we obtained from those losses which we experienced, I would like to emphasize several of them. The first thesis is this aggression of Russia against Ukraine is not by chance. It is a policy, intended policy, which the Russian Federation has been pursuing for all 25 years after the USSR collapse, and Putin is supported by KGB agents and Russian capitals who earn money on Russian people, and those Russian people who watch television and are poisoned with the information from those television. And opposition with Russia is not only the past today, it is also our future, to which we should be ready. And we think that the Ukraine stops Russian ambitions to become an empire, and if even Russian Russian Federation will never stop trying to quarrel us with Europe, Turkey, and other countries. It will be trying to promote conflicts inside the Ukraine, to encourage conflicts inside Ukraine. But we should demonstrate that they will never succeed in this, and use of Ukrainian language is one of the main things. Even despite Putin's statements, Ukraine, he said that Ukraine is not a state at all. The main weaponry of Russia is cheating Russian diplomacy is based on that, and even tactics of military actions is based on that, and even blackmailing with nuclear weapons is used, and the Budapest Memorandum provisions have been broken by Russia. They breached the provisions, and now they are cheating proceeds with the Minsk agreements, but we are not so much
vulnerable.
Powerless and vulnerable as we were before. 80% of Ukrainians now are against Russian president. And this is the result of this war, and it will remain in our relationship. You know that the cheating with weaponry, we also should master our weapons, and we should improve, upgrade our army. And our weaponry is truth, not lie. And this truth we demonstrated in our book, in our brochure. And political leadership, not only political leadership of our country should change, we personally should change and think of the future of our country and how to get there. Thank you, Mr. Gorbulin, and I'm giving the floor to Mr. Oleksandr Lytvynenko, Deputy Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council.
You are given the floor. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's very difficult to speak after Mr. Gorbulin. It's always difficult because he is our patriarch. It's not the age, but the status, independent of the age. But I'll try. First, I would like to discuss several ideas that I consider important. The first, the Russia had intent to subdue Ukraine, and it is their strategic goal. And Russian leaders, they worked in this direction for many years, and this is a very important task for them. It's their defense and security policy. Also, after 1991, Russians documented these ideas in the documents of strategic planning that now are acting in the Russian Federation, and they identifying the main directions of activity of the state. And in order to reach this goal, they use a wide arsenal of measures, among which, as it was told, these are political, energy, information, propaganda, diplomatic policy, and also military actions. The events of 2014, 2015, this is not a coincidence, and they cannot be viewed, they should be considered in the context of the general policy of Russian Federation that view Ukraine and the world, and also they believe in their opposition to the Western countries. And Russian Federation always tried to deprive Ukraine of its independence. And in 2013, they try to create a strategy of these actions. The main instrument, they try to get control over Ukraine through political regime in Ukraine, and when they lost this control, they started to realize military operations, and Vladimir Pavlovich told us about it. And in 2014 or 2013, after Maidan, Russians view this as a positive moment that could strengthen their abilities to influence Ukrainian government and Ukrainian state. After the victory of Maidan, after the victory in Maidan, and fleeing of Yanukovych from Kiev, Russians acted according the plans. First, it is the renewal of power of previous regime, and it is the invitation of Russian forces after a speech of Viktor Yanukovych and leadership of Autonomous Republic of Crimea on the 1st of March, and the scale of military training, and also actions of Russia on the international arena and in Ukraine. And parallel this, there was a scenario how to annex the Crimea and eastern parts of Ukraine. And starting from the 1st of March, they started to destabilize situation in 9 regions of Ukraine. And on the 6th of April, there were attacks on the administrative buildings in several not interrelated regions, in Kharkiv, Donetsk, Lugansk, at the same time, at the same day. So this was a planned operation. And because of the measures taken by Ukraine, the first and second scenario were blocked. And these plans failed, and the Russians localized their activity, and they created a stronghold in Donbass. But the advance was limited. And now a new reality came, and we should understand it clearly, that old Ukraine that existed before 2013 disappeared. Geopolitical situation changed in the Eastern and Eastern Europe. And now we see how new processes are on the way and a new history develops. And the only thing is clearly seen, and we should focus on it and remember about it. Aggressive policy continues, and clear marker of this are those speeches of Putin and Russian leadership. They see Russians and Ukrainians and united people, and there are some criteria. When Russians, they should understand and announce that Ukrainians are separate people, and it depends not on Russians but on us. We should make an effort, we should succeed. And the last message, we are thankful to Europe and to the United States and to all democratic world for their help to Ukraine. But we should defend ourselves. It's our task. Thank you very much. And we are going to answer your questions. Thank you. And now, questions and answers. The topic is interesting, so please introduce yourself first. Yuri Lukichuk, Nation and State newspaper. You told us about question to Gorbulin. You said that the Minsk process is what Russian Federation uses to their own benefit. What is it? What do you think about it? It operates properly. I want to stress that. I told you about the process, not about the Minsk agreements. The agreements were necessary, and it allowed for Ukraine to unify its forces, and these Minsk agreements that violated some political logic and maybe violating chronology, and it was a political decision, but it allowed to stop military actions and the process that is underway. Constant speculations of Russian Federation in their cooperation with France, with Germany, when Ukraine is, they try to force Ukraine to approve political decisions when first three points of the Minsk treatment, ceasefire and withdrawal of weapons and verification by OSCE, these points are violated. And then they say that Ukraine should adopt the law on the elections, but they do not say who will provide the security of these elections. And it is understandable that without security, no elections can take place. This will be some sort of caricature situation. And they want Ukraine to introduce some changes to the constitution. And my personal point of view, it is incorrect to propose to any other country to make changes to the constitution. And this is done at the moment. They do so. And also there should be some sequence of events. And Russia, in these events, it constantly cheats and decept other participants of the Normandy 4. Do you have some other questions? Thank you. Dear scientists and administrators, honestly, what is the scale of this xenophobia that encompasses? We didn't use this word in our village. So what is the scale of this xenophobia that covered all the Russian, and how the situation depend on Putin, and when he leave, how the situation can change, and what is the attitude of Russians towards Ukraine? Tsyganov Viktor Vasilievich, free artist. I answer to you as to a free artist. I remember Viktor Yevtushenko. They say that he cites some verses from poet Yevtushenko about the those who served under Stalin, and now Russia is ill, and we should understand this factor. Putin created a country where only one truth is possible, and this information is provided through the TV channels. And this propaganda looks like truth. And traditionally this disease is full on. It's very difficult to cure, and we should be ready for this. And I told you this in my speech. I would like to add, it's a difficult question. Did Putin create the xenophobia, or Russia wanted and found, Russian society found a person who expressed societal wishes? And I think this is a process, this is a way in two directions. And the change of personalities in the Kremlin will not result in profound changes in the development of our neighbor. I would like to add, at the end of the 90s, there was a Gexagen novel. The novel was called Gexagen. It's an explosive substance, and it describes the rise of Putin as the former KGB agent and the environment that created him. And this environment is more aggressive now. That's why we should understand this and react on this.
Vyacheslav Rudnik, the second free artist. The diagnosis has been set, but diagnosing does not mean treating, curing. How can we treat this disease? Because we depend somehow on this disease as well, on this virus disseminations. So point A, what principles should be implemented by Ukraine? And point B, what actions should be taken to neutralize this infection? Thank you. Priorities. Yes, I agree with you. The objectives of Ukraine are very simple. It could be very simple articulated, but implementation is quite hard. Priority of national interest should be ensured, and strategically supported security policy should be implemented, and our defense and security capabilities potential should be increased and upgraded, and these limits should be extended because they are too small now, and development of economy should underlie their growth. Our task of Ukrainian society is which put all best offers of volunteers, heroism of Ukrainian subversive groups and military men who proved at the front line that Ukraine is our nation's state, but not artificial state, how Ukrainian propaganda actors are telling. So our army should become more efficient, more capable, more powerful, but democratic, which is very important, and our state should be democratic, and our institutions should be efficient. Much efforts have already been put, but we are only on half a way. Nobody can do that instead of us. Also, of course, we can thank the USA for their assistance. I'm sorry, but I would like to so that you clarify for me. As concerns the principles, the first principle is the rules of relationship between the two states. I would like to find out these rules. There is a situation of opposition. I would like to understand. And the second question is, can you rank actions which Ukraine should do, specific actions, specific next steps? Ukraine is interested to stop confrontation with Russian Federation because this distracts large resources from urgent matters of our country's development. This is simple to understand. This is obvious, but our integrity of our territory should be recognized by the Russian Federation and internationally. To this end, we should upgrade and improve our armed forces, our courts, our governmental institutions, which will perform their tasks and help society to develop economy. The state can't develop without developing the society. The government should create conditions for this. I would like to specify a little, to give more details. In Minsk, during political group meeting, when I see a complete I have such a signal for them. Just go out, go away from Donbas territory, and then we will find solution to all our problems of Ukraine. But they do not stop aggression. They rotate their military men, their manpower. They try to build economy, their own economy there. What should we do? What our next steps should be? There are several programs which describe creation of defense industry and what next steps should be taken to develop such important institutes as security service and external intelligence. Within 1 month, these fields can't be developed, but the steps have been taken. Whether we are ready to oppose the Russian monster, I'm not afraid of this word because I know the level of their training, their background. I know special institutions of the Russian Federation. We are not equal, but we should strive like a person which has been involved in strategic weaponry creation during dozens of years. I know that the National Defense Council decision which was taken, it provides us the idea to develop weaponry for 2-3 years ahead, to plan development for 2-3 years in advance. I would like to add several simple things. We, first of all, what should we do? To implement the strategy of national security, our military doctrine and other documents. We should follow them because they set very small and very specific tasks. Creating efficient defensive protective structures, strengthening capabilities of our intelligence service, strengthening our combat capabilities. what to do, we understand. Our resources are very limited. We should efficiently use this potential. The problem is not what to do. The problem is to do that and how to do that. We need to go this way. We should go in direction towards NATO. Many people say that NATO is the best, the highest military standards in the world, and we should implement them in Ukraine. We should transpose them to Ukraine. Our partners do not believe in us. And also in our society, many people do not trust NATO. They think this is an aggressive alliance. The goal is to ensure territorial integrity and development of Ukraine in the interests of our society. Radio Freedom, Leonard Derkach, I have the following question. How do you assess prospects of creating a unit of Crimeans which in future can release Crimea from Russian occupational forces, and is it possible to establish a Turkish military unit such as was from Baltic states military men? And how do you assess? Well, I would answer the first question, your first question. I would like to remind you that the Institute has issued a brochure, Donbass and Crimea, the price of returning them, and thinking of returning Crimea. There is a proposal which are very direct. The proposal is subversive war on the territory of Crimea. It should be carried out now, but it is only one tool. There are 4 scenarios in our brochure. In that research, I told that in every scenario we should find opportunities of their overlapping and using them in combination. Then only we can do something to return the Crimea. We need more, we need wider cooperation on international level, much higher than those sanctions which are in place now. They're insufficient, although thank you for them to Europeans and other countries. And about Crimean Tatar warriors, this is a method of subversive fighting. We should use it. As concerned Crimean Tatar and Turkish military units, I think we are still far from this. But we should remember when, with the help of the Great Britain, we established Polish, Lithuanian, Ukrainian brigade, which was formed during the Balkan crisis. But then it was dissolved, and we should be very careful in approaching such proposals. We do not have any context to use Turkish-Ukrainian military units. Crimea is quite another case. And about the second question.
Thank you. First point. The best would be maybe creation of Ukrainian counterintelligence that demonstrates some effectiveness, and also publicly we see about the arrests of Russian agents in the structures of the security sector, and it means that there are some agents. And the second issue, in 2 years, there was, due to the work of the counterintelligence and measures taken, and replacement of the leadership of these organizations, we have some results, but there's one important moment. There's a classic philosophic rule. We shouldn't explain something as
Conspiracy.
we shouldn't explain everything as a conspiracy, because maybe this is a simpler case than that. While creating intelligence services and other bodies of law enforcement and security, we should think about our security situation and also European principles about which we speak. And they often say that the war is not the reason for not carrying out the reforms. But I will transform this statement. The war is the starting point for reforms. The war should identify what we really build, and taking account, of course, the European principles. We need effective special forces that can defend our state, and also that we should have the effective democratic supervision of these security forces, because security forces, they are like dogs. They should have force, but they should be chained. And there's a comic picture. Freedom, a woman, and liberty is written on it, and a dragon, on which they wrote security. And first picture, this woman bring this dragon, and on the second picture, the dragon eats the woman. So it's impossible to have freedom without security, but this balance is very important. And Vasily Tsiganov provide us with a formula that the length of the hands of the special forces are identified by the state. Director of the Institute of the Research of the East. I have a question to Vladimir Pavlovich and to Alexander Nikolaevich. Simple question. You said that this political and military crisis and this war showed our weaknesses, the weakness of Ukraine. Understandable that independent Ukraine, there's only one state in the world that doesn't like the independence of Ukraine. Of course, there are many different relations. They say we have corruption, but everyone likes Ukrainian independence except one country, Russian Federation, and it is understandable. And I have a question. And do we have some competitive advantages, and what is the source of our force? And I believe that we have some competitive advantages despite our problems. And what are these Ukrainian advantages compared with Russia? it's very difficult to speak about humanitarian policy. And the answer should be maybe in the sphere of humanitarian problems. If we are speaking about people, Ukrainian people differs from Russians. For example, Oleksandr Block and his skills poem. We have more peaceful poetry if we are speaking about 300 or 200 years of development of Russian Empire, and Ukraine is the part of this empire. I think that Ukraine, as a nation, it suffered a lot, more than Russian people. Of course, we had common suffering starting from 1917, and it identifies Ukrainian nation. I say Ukrainian nation as a nation that respects others. And this is the main advantage of Ukrainian nation. We don't need anything from Russia. Even its gas, we can live without it. But we want to live as we want, as our national interests tell us. We don't want to advance outside our borders. I never heard of such an idea. And we are the only nation that gave up nuclear weapons. And I believe that the whole world not as well as all the world. They should be grateful to Ukraine. And this is our example, our Ukrainian example. It shows our wisdom and love for peace of Ukrainian nation. This is a psychological advantage before any nation. Any nation that got territories and tried to divide the nations or suppress someone, I believe that we are in a peaceful paradigm and we have really great advantages in this sphere. But I don't understand humanitarian issues very well, but still I believe that Ukraine is really a peaceful nation. I think that our weakness is connected with our strengths and vice versa. Russians, they have advantage that they have what they call the order. And they say that we have chaos, but their order is fragile, but our chaos, as it shows, it's a possibility for volunteer movements, it's a possibility for some civil society movement, and also volunteer soldiers, and they have a state tradition. And from one side, this is a strategic cultural benefit, but from the other side, it forces them to expand and to repeat their mistakes. And we have a chance to create more effective, modern state and armed forces and special services. And Russians, they have rich economy built on mainly natural resources. But it turns out that the time of energy resources is passing, and we are forced to create something new and not just use some resources. That's why maybe we have some force and we should be able to use it. And the main problem many people here, they are afraid of freedom in the society and also among the civil servants. And for many people, Russian order remains remains a good thing, but we should see new opportunities, and we see that the world changes really fast.
One more idea. Mr. Putin refers most often not to Peter I and Stalin, but to Alexander I, the Tsar, who thought that nobody can be believed in, just army and fleet, but an army and a fleet can't make the country prosperous. The last three questions, please. One more artist, another artist yet. I don't know whether many people read your research without the right, where you told without the right to penitence, and you told that Russia is saying that we do not have right for political state. Political elite in Ukraine now is not better, it is dishonest. And sometimes it is just the fifth column. And in this closed system and the emergence of new forces in society, you don't like this matter. This book was written without the right on penitence. It was written in 2008. Before 2010, I forecasted the scenes, the events that happened in 2010. So I think some portraits, I think, are very clear there. They are portraits of Ms. Tymoshenko, Mr. Yatsenyuk. Unfortunately, this book is interesting to our political elite only currently these days. Those days I tried to tell that our political elite is insufficiently efficient. I told, I even said that we did not have political elite at all, and I would not say that the situation has changed since that time as concern our political elite. There are no more questions. Thank you, dear speakers. So we finish our press briefing.